Chapter 1. The Divorce Paper. No one signed. Elena Hart stood before the mirror in her spacious bedroom, her hands trembling as she held the divorce papers. The thin sheet of paper, with only a few emotionless lines, weighed on her shoulders like the whole world. 3 years, 1,000 days living in this cold mansion where every corner echoed with silence. She looked at her reflection, glossy brown hair, deep blue eyes now clouded like a sky before a storm. She once thought she could endure it, but not anymore, not another day. She descended the staircase, her heels tapping steadily against the marble floor, the only sound breaking the stillness of the house. Dinner had been set, as it was every night, but only one place at the table. The seat across from hers was empty. Lucian Thorne, her husband in name only, had never once joined her for a meal. She placed the divorce papers on the table, right beside her sparkling wedding ring. The chandelier's light danced across the diamond, but it couldn't warm her heart. Elena sat down, stirring a cup of cold coffee. Her mother, who had passed away just months earlier, had left a final wish, that she marry Lucian Thorne, a stranger with a sharp gaze and a colder soul. "He will protect you," her mother had written in her final letter, full of faith. Elena, only 24 at the time, grief-stricken and naive, had agreed without questioning. She thought it was her way of keeping a promise, of feeling like her mother was still with her. But for 3 years, Lucian had never touched her. No hand to hold, no gentle glance, not even an explanation. She had waited, hoped, believed that maybe his coldness was just armor, that one day he would look at her like a husband looks at his wife. But all she had were long, lonely nights, empty mornings, and the question that haunted her endlessly, "Why did you marry me?" She heard the sound of a car pulling up at the gate. Lucian was home. Her heart pounded not from excitement, but from anxiety. She stood, adjusted her dress, trying to appear composed. The front door opened. Lucian stepped in, his tall frame wrapped in a fitted black suit, his handsome face carved in ice. He glanced at her barely like she was invisible. Then his eyes fell on the paper. "What is that?" His voice was deep, emotionless. Elena took a deep breath, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Divorce papers. I want to end this." Lucian said nothing. He stepped to the table, picked up the document, turned it over like it was just another business contract. No protest, no pain, just silence. The same silence she had lived with for years. She waited, hoped just this once that he'd say something. Ask her why, stop her. But he simply set the paper back down. Unsigned. "You have nothing to say?" Elena's voice cracked louder than she meant. 3 years, Lucian. 3 years I've lived like a ghost in your house. You never touched me, never spoke to me, never looked at me like I was your wife. Why? Why did you even agree to marry me if you never wanted me? Lucian stared at her. His gaze darkened like a storm was building behind his eyes, barely held back. "You want answers," he said, voice low, almost a whisper. "But some things you don't need to know." His words cut like a blade. Elena clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. "Don't need to know?" She gave a bitter laugh, eyes brimming with tears she refused to let fall. "I've spent 3 years trying to understand you, Lucian. I deserve to know why." He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked down the hallway toward his study. Elena followed, her heart sinking. She wouldn't cry, wouldn't let him see her break. But as he opened the door, she glimpsed him pulling a folder from the desk drawer, his eyes flashing with panic when he noticed her watching. She stepped closer, curiosity piqued. But Lucian quickly locked the drawer. In that fleeting moment, she had seen something. A piece of paper, with handwriting, the name Clara Hart, her mother's name. "Lucienne," she called, her voice shaking. "Why is my mother's name in there?" He froze, back rigid, but he didn't turn around. "Don't ask about things that don't concern you," he said coldly, and slammed the door shut. Elena stood there, heart thundering. Her mother's name, in Lucian's drawer, a secret he didn't want her to know. She turned back toward the dining room, her eyes falling once again on the unsigned divorce paper, beside the wedding ring. She picked up the ring, gripped it tightly, then let it fall. The sound of metal striking stone echoed through the room, dry and final. She wouldn't live in silence anymore. Elena walked out the front door without looking back. The night wind cut through the air, cold and sharp, but not colder than her heart. It had been another long day. Elena stepped out of the house, the unsigned divorce papers still lingering like an open wound. The golden hues of the New York sunset fell gently on her shoulders, but they couldn't chase away the cold left by last night's conversation with Lucian. "Don't ask about things that don't concern you," he had said as if she were a stranger, not the wife who had lived beside him for 3 years. She clutched her handbag, trying to push Lucien's face and that paper bearing her mother's name from her mind. She needed air. She needed space to breathe. Central Park opened up before her like another world, lush trees, the laughter of children, a space completely detached from the cold, suffocating mansion she called home. Elena sat on a wooden bench and opened her sketchbook, the one she always carried. Art had once been her passion, but since her marriage, her drawings had become nothing more than lifeless scribbles. She flipped to a blank page, fingers brushing the surface, not knowing where to begin. "Elena? Elena Hart, is that you?" A warm, familiar voice pulled her out of her thoughts. She looked up, and there he was, smiling like sunlight. Julian Kane. His face hadn't changed since their college days. Tousled brown hair, expressive eyes, and that smile that still made her smile in return. He wore a light blue shirt, sleeves casually rolled up, effortless yet captivating. "Julian!" Elena stood surprised. "It's been ages. What are you doing here?" "Just taking a walk," he shrugged, sitting beside her without asking. "And you? A talented artist like you, sitting here with a blank sketchbook that's not the Elena I used to know." She smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "People change, Julian. I'm not that girl who painted in every hallway anymore." Julian tilted his head, his gaze searching her face. "Maybe, but your eyes are the same, still beautiful, but sadder." His voice was gentle, without judgment. "What's going on, Elena? You don't have to tell me, but I know you're not okay." She looked at him, caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. Lucian had never asked her anything like that. She inhaled deeply, ready to lie and say she was fine, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she shook her head with a tight smile. "Just a long day. What about you? What are you doing these days?" Julian pulled an architectural sketch from his bag and spread it between them on the bench. "Freelance architect. No office, no boss, just me and a bunch of wild ideas." He pointed at the design, a small library with elegant, flowing lines that felt more like art than structure. "This is my latest project. A tiny library, but I want it to feel like a painting. What do you think?" Elena leaned in, her fingers tracing the curves of the sketch. She found herself smiling, truly smiling, as the old spark of artistic passion stirred within her. "It's beautiful, Julian. Like a poem drawn in ink." She looked up and their eyes met. His hand brushed against hers on the paper, a light touch, but enough to send her pulse racing. Startled, she pulled back, her face flushing. "Sorry," Julian laughed softly, though his gaze lingered. "You still blush just like you used to." She chuckled for the first time in months, feeling something in her chest loosen, something that had been locked away. They kept talking about college, about the paintings she once loved, about dreams she had long since buried. City lights flickered on, mirrored in Julian's eyes, and Elena realized she was looking at him longer than necessary. He was nothing like Lucian, warm, open, and genuinely interested in her. "You know," Julian's voice lowered, "back then I always wanted to ask you out for coffee, but you were always busy chasing your sketches. Now, I don't want to miss the chance again." He paused, then continued. "There's a mental health charity I've been supporting. They're holding an event this weekend. Would you come with me? No pressure, just to check it out." Elena hesitated. She was still a married woman, technically, though the marriage lived only on paper. But Julian's invitation and the sincerity in his eyes made her want to say yes. "I'll think about it," she said softly. "But a charity? Since when do you care about mental health?" Julian smiled, but there was a shadow behind it. "Long story. Maybe I'll tell you someday." He stood, handing her a business card. "Call me if you change your mind, or if you just want to talk. I'll be here." As Julian walked away, Elena looked down at the card, her fingers brushing his name. She gazed out at the park, where the city lights twinkled like stars. For the first time in 3 years, she felt her heart beat differently, not from pain, but from a flicker of hope. But then Lucian's image crept back into her mind, the storm in his eyes when he locked that drawer, the paper with her mother's name, Clara Hart. Why was her mother's name in there? And why had Lucien, a man who had never touched her, kept that secret? Elena stood, sketchbook still blank in her hands. But this time, something inside her had shifted. She would find the truth no matter how much it hurt. You're watching Soul Stories, where every tale whispers of love, healing, and hope. If you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, and that love often arrives when we least expect it, don't forget to subscribe and be part of our journey. Now stay with us. The story is just beginning. Chapter 2. The Locked Room. Elena stood before the dark wooden door on the second floor of the mansion, her heart pounding violently against her ribs. This room had always been locked, a hidden corner in the house she had called home for the past 3 years. Lucian had never allowed her inside, and she had never dared to cross that line. Until now. Last night, the panic in his eyes as he locked that drawer, the name Clara Hart scrawled on the paper, it had ignited something in her. A fire. She had to know. She deserved to know. The key lay in her hand, stolen from the drawer beneath the dining table after Lucien left this morning. She had hesitated, her fingers brushing over the cold metal for hours, torn between respecting his boundaries and needing the truth. But when Julian's warm smile flashed in her mind, when she remembered how he looked at her, like she was everything, she realized she couldn't go on living in the dark. Not another day. She slid the key into the lock. A soft click echoed through the silent hallway. The door creaked open, releasing a rush of cold air as if the room had been frozen in time. Dust-covered bookshelves, a worn wooden desk, a painting hanging on the wall, barely catching the weak light from the window. Elena stepped inside, a strange sense of trespassing washing over her, as if she'd entered something sacred. She moved toward the painting, a portrait of a woman with blonde hair and sorrowful eyes. There was something familiar about the face, but she couldn't place it. Beneath the painting sat a small wooden box unlocked. Elena opened it. Her heart quickened. Inside was a yellowed letter, written in a trembling hand. She scanned the page. Every word hit her like a blade. Lucian, my son, please forgive me for not being strong enough. Your father took everything from us, but don't let this pain define you. Live well, and don't let anyone else suffer as I did. A suicide note. Elena's breath caught in her throat. The woman in the portrait, Lucian's mother. He had never spoken of her, only mentioning once that she had passed long ago. But the pain in this letter painted a harrowing story. She found an old photograph next. Lucien as a young boy, standing beside his mother. His eyes filled with fear. Suddenly, a sound behind her. She flinched, the letter slipping from her fingers. Lucian stood in the doorway, his face pale, his eyes blazing with fury and something else, pain. "What are you doing in here?" His voice was low, dangerous, like a wounded animal guarding its last secret. Elena straightened, trying to stay calm though her pulse was erratic. "I found the key. I needed to know the truth, Lucian. This room, this letter, your mother. What happened?" He stepped forward, snatching the letter off the ground. His fingers gripped the paper so tightly it looked like he might tear it in two. "You had no right to touch this," he said, his voice shaking. "You don't understand anything." "Then explain it," Elena cried, tears spilling before she realized. 3 years, Lucian. I've lived like a ghost in this marriage. And now I find this, and I see my mother's name in your drawer. Don't I deserve to know why?" Lucian turned away, gripping the back of a chair. The silence was heavy, suffocating like the moment before a storm. Finally he spoke, his voice raw. "My mother was abused, for years, by my father, until one day, she couldn't take it anymore. She ended her life. I saw it, Elena. I watched her die. I saw her eyes shatter, and he choked on the words. I've spent my life terrified that I carry that same darkness, that one day I'd hurt someone the way he hurt her. That's why I never touched you. I didn't want to Become him. Elena stood frozen, her heart aching like it might break open. She wanted to go to him, to reach for his hand, but her feet were rooted to the floor. Lucian, she whispered. Don't! His voice turned cold again, eyes shutting the world out. You wanted a divorce, do it, but stop digging into my past. She stared at him, the man she had called her husband, now more of a stranger than ever. Then her gaze fell on the edge of the desk. A corner of paper peeked out from beneath a stack of files. Her breath caught. She recognized the handwriting, her mother's. Clara Hart. She reached for it instinctively, but Lucian moved faster, snatching it and shoving it into his jacket pocket. That's enough, Elena, he said firmly. Get out. She wanted to scream, to demand the letter, but the look in his eyes, anguish mixed with warning, stopped her cold. She walked out. Every step felt like stone. Behind her, the door slammed shut. A harsh click of the lock sealed it like a verdict. But the puzzle pieces had started to fall into place. Lucian's mother, the suicide letter, her own mother's name, a hidden promise. Something bigger, something buried, was hiding beneath it all. Elena stood in the hallway, fists clenched, and for the first time she felt more than pain. She felt fire. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Elena stood at the mansion's front door, clutching an umbrella, but she didn't open it. Rain began to fall, icy drops soaking through her thin coat. After yesterday's confrontation in the locked room, she couldn't spend another minute in that house. Lucian's words about his mother, about the fear of the poisoned blood he believed he carried, still echoed in her mind. But they couldn't silence the bigger question. Why was her mother's name, Clara Hart, in that letter? And why had Lucienne ripped it from her hands as if she had no right to the past that shaped her own life? She stepped out into the rain, letting it wash away the storm inside her. Each footstep on the cobbled street was a step away from Lucian, from the marriage that had imprisoned her in silence. But as she reached the corner, a black car pulled up beside her. The door opened. Lucian stepped out. No umbrella, no coat. Just his drenched suit and eyes that locked onto her, no longer cold, but burning with something raw, as if he were at war with himself. Elena, come back, he said, voice low but urgent. You'll get sick in this weather. She let out a bitter laugh, her voice mixing with the sound of falling rain. Sick? Lucian? Since when do you care if I get sick? For 3 years, you barely looked at me, never touched me, never spoke a kind word. And now you want me to come home because of the rain? Lucian stepped closer, rain dripping down his face, accentuating the sharp edges of his expression. You don't understand, he said hoarsely. I didn't want to hurt you. I told you, I said. Don't bring up your mother again, Elena snapped, her tears blending with the rain. I don't care what you're afraid of, Lucian. I just want to know why you married me. Why was my mother's name in that room? Why did you keep me in this marriage but treat me like a stranger? He froze as if her words had struck some deep, hidden wound. The rain intensified, pounding the pavement, drowning out all but the sound of their breaths. Then, without warning, Lucian stepped forward and grabbed her wrist. The first touch in 3 years, and it sent a jolt through her like lightning. You want the truth? He asked, voice trembling with emotion. The truth is, I can't let you go, even though I know I don't deserve you. Before she could react, he pulled her into his arms. His lips found hers under the pouring rain, a kiss that was fierce, desperate, filled with all the words he had never said. Rain soaked her hair, her clothes, but his warmth melted through the cold. For a fleeting moment, she kissed him back, losing herself in the closeness she had craved for so long. But then, the memory of her mother's letter, of his silence, came slicing through her like a blade. She pushed him away, breathless. It's too late, Lucian, she said, her voice cracking. 3 years is a lifetime in a woman's heart. You can't fix everything with a kiss. Lucian stood there, drenched and silent, pain written all over his face. Elena, He stopped, searching for words that might hold her back. Give me a chance, just one. She shook her head, the rain masking her tears. I gave you 3 years. You gave me nothing but silence. She turned and walked into the downpour, but then a memory struck her like a flash of lightning. 2 years ago, an art exhibition. She had nearly given up painting, but an anonymous sponsor had funded the show. Her first painting had sold for an unusually high price. She'd always thought it was luck, but now, staring into Lucian's eyes, she wondered, was it him? Lucian, she stopped, her voice shaking. The art show 2 years ago, was it you? He didn't respond right away, but his silence was all the answer she needed. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, voice breaking. Why do all these things for me and then never let me know? Because I didn't know how to love you without hurting you, he said, voice barely audible over the rain. I promised your mother that I would protect you, but I didn't know how to keep that promise and keep you close. Elena's breath caught. Her mother again. Clara Hart. What promise? Protect her from what? She wanted to ask, to scream, but Lucian's eyes filled with sorrow and sincerity stopped her. I don't need you to protect me, she said, voice firm. I need a husband, not a man full of secrets. She turned and walked away, faster now, letting the rain hide the storm of emotions on her face. Lucian didn't follow, but she could feel his gaze trailing her, heavy as the downpour crashing around them. When she turned the corner and vanished from his sight, her heart twisted. That kiss, that first touch, had awakened something in her. The part of her that had once believed in Lucian, in their marriage. But it had also deepened the questions clawing at her soul. What did my mother ask of him? And why has he never told me the truth? She clenched her fists. Next time, she wouldn't walk away without answers. Chapter 3. Julian is the wind. Today, Elena stood in her small art studio, soft golden light streaming through the window, illuminating the canvas in front of her. For the first time in 3 years, each stroke of her brush felt alive, infused with breath and color, as if her encounter with Julian had brought her art back to life. The kiss in the rain with Lucian still haunted her, not because of love, but because of the questions it stirred. The promise he made to her mother, Clara Hart. The art show he secretly funded. She shook her head, trying to banish the image of his pained eyes, but her heart remained heavy. She needed an escape, a place to breathe. Her phone buzzed. A message from Julian. Charity event tonight, 7 p.m. Will you come? I want to see your smile. She smiled softly. Julian, with his radiant grin and kind eyes, was like a breeze brushing through the stormy days of her life. She replied, I'll be there. See you soon. Elena returned to the mansion, her steps lighter than usual. In front of her bedroom mirror, she slipped into a fitted sapphire blue dress that made her eyes look deeper, more vivid. She let her wavy brown hair fall loose, catching the light in soft cascades. For the first time in 3 years, she felt beautiful, not to please anyone, but for herself. Her eyes flicked to the wedding ring lying on the vanity. She left it behind. The unsigned divorce papers still sat beside it, a quiet reminder of Lucian. As she stepped outside, a black car sat parked at the corner. Inside, Lucian watched through the tinted glass. He didn't know where she was going, but seeing her in that dress, with a faint smile on her lips, made his chest tighten. He hadn't planned to follow her, but when she climbed into a taxi, he started his engine, as if something invisible compelled him forward. At the charity event, soft music floated through a warmly lit room. Julian waited at the entrance, wearing a perfectly tailored gray suit. His eyes lit up when he saw Elena. You're even more beautiful than I imagined, he said, reaching out his hand. She took it, feeling the warmth of his slender fingers wrap around hers. Unlike Lucienne, Julian made her feel seen, cherished. They stepped into the ballroom together, speaking of simple things, her past paintings, his architectural dreams, the ambitions both had buried for years. Julian led her to a corner exhibit filled with photos of the organization's work supporting mental health. I joined because I want to help people fighting battles no one can see, he said, his voice low. Sometimes just one person listening can change everything. Elena looked at him, her heart trembling. With Julian, she felt free, like she could breathe again. She wasn't a wife trapped in a cold marriage. She was just herself. You always surprise me, she said with a soft smile. Lucian never talks about feelings. He hides everything in the dark. Julian tilted his head, eyes steady. I'm not Lucian, Elena. I want you to be happy no matter what you choose. He brushed her hand gently, and this time, she didn't pull away. From across the room, Lucian stood in the shadows, his gaze locked on Elena and Julian. Her smile, the way she looked at that man, it pierced him like a blade. He wanted to walk up, to pull her back, but he didn't have the courage. His fists clenched at his sides. He turned away. Still, the image of Elena in that sapphire dress burned into his memory. In the following weeks, Elena and Julian saw each other more often. They walked in the park, drank coffee in small cafes, watched old films side by side. Each outing became a piece of peace in Elena's life. Julian spoke of homes he dreamed of, designing a beach house with wide windows and light that filled every room. She told him about the paintings she used to love, about the dream of being an artist that Lucian had slowly smothered. With Julian, there were no secrets, no silence. He was wind-carrying the scent of flowers and the freedom she had longed for. One evening, sitting on a park bench, Julian looked up at the sky speckled with stars. "If you could paint a star," he asked, "what would it look like?" Elena leaned back, smiling. "A star that shines but isn't alone. A star surrounded by others, never lonely again." Elena sat in her studio, the soft glow of the desk lamp falling over an unfinished canvas. Streaks of sapphire blue danced across the fabric, reminding her of the dress she wore the night before, when she stood beside Julian under the glittering lights of the charity event. With him, she felt free, like a bird finally released from its cage. But Lucian's shadow lingered, his eyes watching her from the darkness. That desperate kiss in the rain, everything left her unsettled. She wanted to forget him, forget the cold shell of their marriage. But every time she remembered the letter from her mother in that locked room, an invisible string tugged her back. She rose and walked to a small keepsake box, the one that held a childhood drawing of Sophia. The inscription beneath it, "For Mom, who always protected us," was a reminder that Clara Hart, her mother, had left behind secrets Elena had never understood. That letter, "Lucian, protect my daughter." The words echoed in her mind like a riddle. Protect her from what? And why had Lucian agreed? The doorbell rang, pulling her from her thoughts. She opened the door, and there he was. Lucian, in his usual sharp black suit, but looking worn, exhausted like he hadn't slept in days. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low but firm. Elena crossed her arms, guarded. "Now you want to talk? After 3 years of silence?" He didn't respond right away. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the studio, stopping at the canvas on the easel. "You're still painting," he said softly. "I missed your work." She let out a dry laugh, masking the pain. "Don't pretend you cared, Lucian. You never really saw me, let alone my art." She stepped closer, voice sharper. "Say it. That letter from my mother. What do you know about her? And why did you marry me if you never wanted me?" Lucian turned, his expression darkening like storm clouds rolling in. "I don't want to talk about this," he began. "No," Elena cut in. "I've waited long enough. I saw the letter in your room. Protect my daughter. What did my mother ask of you? And why have you kept it from me?" Her voice trembled with rage and heartbreak. "I'm your wife, even if just on paper. I deserve to know the truth." His fist clenched at his sides like he was wrestling a demon inside him. Rain began to fall against the windows, each drop echoing like a ticking clock between them. Finally, he spoke, his voice gravelly with pain. "This marriage wasn't about love. Not at first. Your mother, Clara, she asked me to marry you. She wanted me to protect you, but you don't need to know why." Elena went still. The floor beneath her felt like it was cracking open. "Protect me? From what? And why did you agree if you didn't love me?" She stepped forward, finger pressed to his chest. "You turned me into a puppet in someone else's plan. You let me live 3 years like a shadow. And now you tell me it was to protect me? I don't believe you." Lucian took her hand gently, but his fingers trembled. "I didn't want to marry you," he confessed, voice barely a whisper. "I refused Clara. But she said if I didn't, you'd be in danger. I didn't have a choice." Elena yanked her hand back, tears brimming in her eyes. "Danger? From who? From what? Do you think I'm too fragile to handle the truth?" She backed away, arms wrapped tightly around herself. "My mother trusted you, but what did you do with that trust? You left me alone. You kept me in the dark. And now you use her as your excuse? Her voice cracked. Lucian, if you can't tell me the truth, don't expect me to stay. He looked at her then, with eyes filled with anguish and conflict. Elena, there are things that will only hurt you if you knew. I made Clara a promise to keep you safe, no matter what it cost me. He paused as if on the edge of revealing something deeper, but then pulled back. If you want the divorce, I'll sign it. But don't dig into the past, not for my sake, for yours. She stood there, chest rising and falling with every jagged breath. His words, however sincere, only stirred deeper questions. If her mother had trusted Lucian so much, why hadn't she ever told Elena herself? And what was this danger she was supposedly shielded from? She remembered the letter in the locked room again, her mother's shaky handwriting. She doesn't have the cunning to survive in this world. Did her mother know something about the family, the company, or someone else? Lucian, she said, voice steadier than she felt. If you won't tell me the truth, I'll find it myself. I'm not the naive girl my mother thought I was, and I don't need you to protect me anymore. He turned to her, eyes aching with something unsaid. But instead of speaking, he nodded quietly and walked out of the studio, leaving her alone with the rain and the unanswered questions. As the door closed behind him, Elena turned to her painting. The blue on the canvas reminded her of Julian's eyes that brought her peace, even if they belonged to a world she didn't fully understand. She clenched her fists, a fire igniting inside her. She would no longer let Lucian's silence or her mother's secrets control her life. She picked up her phone and texted Julian, "Coffee tomorrow. I want to hear more about your dreams." She needed the freedom he represented, but deep down she knew. To be truly free, she had to face the darkness Lucian had tried so hard to hide. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. Chapter 4. Secrets Beneath the Cafe Lights. Elena sat in the quiet corner of a coffee shop, the warm golden light overhead casting a soft glow on the cooling cup of coffee in her hands. After this morning's confrontation with Lucien, his words that he married her to protect her per her mother's request still swirled through her mind like a storm. You don't need to know why, he had said, but his silence only fueled her resolve. She gazed out the window, where the city lights blinked like distant stars, and she thought of Julian, how being near him made her feel free, like a bird uncaged. He was the wind, gentle, fragrant, and light, everything Lucien was not. The cafe door opened, and Julian stepped in, his smile radiant like sunlight breaking through clouds. He wore a navy sweater, his tousled brown hair perfectly imperfect, and his eyes lit up when he saw her. "Hello, my favorite painter," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "You're early. Were you just that excited to see me?" Elena laughed, a little tension slipping from her shoulders. With Julian, there were no icy stares, no buried secrets. He made her feel seen, valued. "Maybe," she teased, her voice tinged with fatigue, "or maybe I just needed a place to breathe." Julian tilted his head, his expression soft but perceptive. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world. You don't have to tell me everything, but I'm here if you want to." His sincerity warmed her chest. She wanted to tell him about Lucian, about the letter in the locked room, about the mysterious promise he'd made to her mother. But before she could open her mouth, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Ask Julian Kane about Sophia Hart. Ask what he did to his ex." Elena's blood turned to ice. Sophia, her older sister who had taken her own life 5 years ago, when Elena was still in college. She had never told Julian about Sophia, but the tone of that message, cold, clinical, cut through her like a blade. She looked up at Julian, who was still smiling, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to break. "Julian," she said, her voice trembling, "do you know someone named Sophia Hart?" His smile vanished. He set his coffee down. His face went pale as if the color had been drained from it. "Sophia Hart?" he echoed, voice barely audible. Elena turned her phone toward him. The screen displayed the message. "Someone just sent me this. They told me to ask you about Sophia. She was my sister, Julian. What do you know about her?" Julian stared at the screen. His hands trembled. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wide with disbelief and something deeper pain. Your sister, he whispered almost to himself. Elena, I just found out, recently, when I saw your name on the invitation for the charity exhibit. I saw Hart and asked a mutual friend. They told me you were Sophia's sister, but I swear when we met in the park, I didn't know. Elena pressed a hand to her chest, her heart aching. You dated my sister? She asked, voice breaking. 5 years ago, Sophia, she killed herself. Julian, what happened? Julian looked down, his fingers clenched around the edge of the chair. I loved her, he said hoarsely. She was brilliant, passionate, but fragile. I was young and stupid. I didn't see how much she was hurting. When she died, I fell apart. I never meant to hurt her, Elena, but I was part of the reason she didn't stay. I wasn't good enough to save her. Tears filled Elena's eyes, but she held them back. She didn't want to break, not now. And you didn't think I deserved to know that? She whispered. You found out I was her sister, and you still stayed close to me? Let me trust you? I didn't know at first, Julian said quickly, desperation in his voice. Back when we met in college, even when we met again in the park, I just thought, you reminded me of her. When I found out the truth, I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid you'd walk away. Elena, you're not Sophia. You're stronger, brighter. I've spent the last 5 years working with that charity to make peace with my guilt, to help people like her. I didn't want you to see me as someone who failed. His truth hit her like a soft blow, painful yet not cruel. Elena stood, her hand gripping her bag tightly. I don't know if I can trust you now, she said, her voice barely steady. My sister was my whole world, Julian, and now I find out you were a part of that pain. She turned and walked out, leaving behind the cafe's warm lights and Julian's quiet pleas. Back in her apartment, she opened her keepsake box. Inside was a sunflower painting, Sophia's favorite. In the corner, a handwritten dedication. For Mom, who always protected us. Elena clutched the painting to her chest as tears finally fell. Julian had brought her peace, but now she realized even the wind could carry blades. She clenched her fists. She wouldn't let these secrets control her. Not Julian's, not Lucian's, not even her mother's. She would face the past, face Lucian, and uncover the truth, no matter how dark it was. Elena stood before Lucian's office door, heart pounding as if it wanted to burst from her chest. 2 days had passed since her meeting with Julian, since the truth about her sister Sophia had shattered the fragile calm she had found in him. Julian's confession that he had once loved Sophia and had been part of the pain that led to her death had torn through her like a blade. And Lucian, with his cryptic words about a promise to her mother, Clara Hart, had left her spinning in another spiral of silence. That letter in the locked room, the words "protect my daughter," and the flicker of fear in his eyes whenever she mentioned her mother, all of it had brought her to this moment. She gripped the office key tightly taken from the dining room drawer after Lucian left the house that morning. She didn't want to be a trespasser, but Lucian's silence, the truth about Sophia, and the scattered pieces of her mother's past had driven her to the edge. She inserted the key, turned the handle, and stepped into the cold, quiet room. The air smelled of paper and ink. Sunlight from the window lit up the small steel safe tucked into the far wall. She had seen Lucian open it once, his face flickering with panic when he thought she wasn't watching. Elena knelt before the safe, hands trembling as she typed in possible combinations. First, Lucian's birthday beep. Wrong. Then the founding date of Thorn Enterprises beep. Wrong again. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding. Then a painful, daring thought. Their wedding date. She entered the numbers, fingers numb. Click. The lock released. Elena stared at the open door, stunned. Their wedding date. He used that. Why? Inside was a thick folder, the cover scribbled with uneven handwriting. Operation HART. Her name, Elena Hart. She sat down on the floor and flipped through the documents, each page a dagger. Charts, figures, emails. Then one email leapt from the pile sent 3 years ago by Lucian's private attorney. Lucian, this is the only way to keep the shares from her aunt. Clara Hart holds 30% of Thorn Enterprises. If Elena inherits, her aunt will manipulate her, and the company will fall into a competitor's hands. Marriage is the solution to transfer legal control to you. Elena must never know. Elena stopped breathing. Marriage. The word pierced through her like a knife. 3 years in that cold mansion, waiting for affection, hoping for love, had been a strategy. Lucian had married her to gain control of her mother's shares, to secure his place as CEO. She searched the file for anything that could redeem him. Another document described the aunt she barely remembered, a woman who had argued with her mother over finances and custody. A manipulator, a threat. But the final line in the email crushed her. Keep it secret. She's too naive to understand. Naive. The word slapped her across the face. She wasn't Lucian's wife. She was a legal pawn, a tool. Her grip on the paper tightened as tears splattered onto the floor. Her heart shattered beneath the weight of the truth. Then, footsteps. Elena looked up, frozen. Lucian stood in the doorway, pale and shaken, eyes wide when he saw the folder in her hands. Elena, he breathed, voice trembling. You! Why would you do this? She stood, gripping the file like it might hold her upright. Why? She cried. Because you never told me anything. I found this Operation HART. You married me to take my mother's shares, to protect your company, and you called that protecting me? Lucian stepped forward, reaching for her. She backed away. Elena, it's not what you think, he rasped. I promised your mother. Don't say her name, she snapped, tears streaking her face. You said you were protecting me, but you were protecting your empire. 3 years, Lucian. 3 years I lived in silence, hoping one day you'd see me, love me. But I was just a cog in your dirty plan. She hurled the file onto the floor. Papers scattered like shards of glass, like the pieces of her broken heart. Lucian stood still, wrecked. Elena, But the words died on his lips. She wiped her tears, voice cracking but steady. I was alone, Lucian. So alone that I thought Julian could save me. But he's part of the reason my sister's dead. And you, the man I called husband, left me drowning in that loneliness, only to hand me this pain. I have nothing left. Then she turned and walked out, her steps echoing in the silence. Outside, the sky was a heavy gray, but there was no rain, only stillness. She thought of Julian, of his warmth, but now it was laced with the sorrow of Sophia. She thought of Lucian, of the grief in his eyes, but nothing could undo the betrayal, the lies, the manipulation. And yet, behind that heartbreak, something else stirred. A fire that would no longer let her be anyone's pawn. Not Julian's, not Lucian's, not even Clara Hart's. Not anymore. Chapter 5. The Goodbye Moment. Elena stood in the grand living room of the mansion, her face pale, streaked with tears under the soft glow of the chandelier. The file labeled Operation HART still lay across the floor of Lucian's office, its scattered pages now the jagged remains of her heart. The truth that her mother had owned 30% of Lucien's company and that he had married her not for love, but to seize control of that inheritance and block her manipulative aunt from gaining power had pierced through her soul. She had always known their marriage wasn't born of affection, but still, she had hoped. She had tried, waited. 3 years of silent dinners, of unopened invitations for weekend getaways, of wishing, praying that the man she married would one day see her. And now, standing in the cold, silent mansion, she had never felt more alone, like a lone star adrift in a sky stripped of light. She had packed her suitcase, just a few clothes, a few essentials. Nothing heavy, just enough to leave. Then came the sound of footsteps on the stairs. Lucian. He looked thinner, gaunt, his eyes full of anguish and panic, as if he knew this moment could undo everything. Elena, he said, his voice low and frayed, please don't go. We need to talk. She turned to face him, her fists clenched, her voice brittle beneath the weight of pain. Talk? Now you want to talk after I found that file? After learning that you married me to get my mother's shares? To stay CEO? Her eyes burned into his. What was I to you, Lucian? A legal loophole? A pawn in a contract between you and your lawyer? Lucian stepped forward, hand outstretched. But she backed away, her eyes a warning. Elena, it's not what you think, he said, voice trembling. I married you because of your mother, Clara. She begged me to protect you, to keep you from your aunt and those who would exploit you. But somewhere along the way, he swallowed, eyes glistening. I fell in love with you. I don't know when, but I did. Elena let out a bitter laugh through the tears. Love? Her voice cracked. You call 3 years of silence love? 3 years of distance, of never touching me, never speaking to me unless necessary? She stepped closer, her voice breaking as the memories flooded back. I cooked for you every night. I waited, even knowing you wouldn't come home. I planned trips. I dreamed of a family. I stood outside your office hoping you'd glance at me, hoping for one moment where I mattered. She looked away, her voice barely a whisper. But all I got was silence. And now I know every moment of this marriage was orchestrated as part of Operation HART. Lucian stood frozen, her words slicing through him. Elena, But he had no words. None that could fix what had already broken. She shook her head, tears streaming freely. I gave you everything I had, Lucian. My heart, my hope. And you gave me lies wrapped in legal documents. My mother trusted you. She believed you'd protect me. She gave you her legacy. But you left me alone, so alone that I started to believe I didn't deserve love. Lucian dropped to his knees, clutching the side of a chair, his voice raw. Elena, please, he begged. I was wrong. I wanted to protect you, but I didn't know how to love you without hurting you. If you need to go, I won't stop you. But give me one chance, just one, to make it right. I'll tell you everything. No more secrets. She looked at him, the man she once believed would be her whole world now on the floor before her, shattered. But his apology couldn't erase 3 years of loneliness. It couldn't rewrite the words in that file. You had 3 years, she said softly. I gave you everything. And now I have nothing left. She turned and walked out, but before she closed the door behind her, she placed a canvas on the dining table, a portrait of Lucian, one she had painted in her quietest, loneliest nights when she tried to decode the storm in his eyes. Beside it, a note. I never wanted the shares. I just wanted to be loved genuinely. Elena arrived at her best friend Mia's apartment, her only safe harbor now. Mia opened the door without hesitation and pulled her into a tight hug. You don't have to go through this alone, Mia whispered. In the cozy warmth of the apartment, filled with the scent of coffee and soft background music, Elena told Mia everything. The dinners she had prepared, the planned vacations that never happened, the horrifying truth in the file. Mia listened in silence, holding her hand. Your mother was strong, Mia said gently. She taught you how to stand, Elena. You carry that same strength. Elena nodded, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She thought of the letter in Lucian's hidden room. Protect my daughter. She thought of all her efforts to make something real out of something built on lies. She had never felt more lost, like a boat adrift in an ocean with no shore in sight. But Mia's words and the warmth of her hand reminded her. She still had something left, herself. Later, as she left Mia's apartment and stepped into the night, Elena paused under the streetlight, breathing in the cool air. The sky above sparkled with stars, but even they couldn't warm the emptiness inside her. She knew she couldn't go back. Not to the mansion, not to Lucian's secrets. But she also knew she wouldn't let this loneliness define her. She would leave it all behind and begin again on her own terms. You're watching Soul Stories exclusive to our channel. If you're still with us, drop a comment. We read and cherish them all. Subscribe to support more heartfelt, original stories. Thanks for being part of the Soul Stories family. Chapter 6, The Journey to Freedom. Elena stood on the beach in Santa Cruz, California, the sunset bathing the water in gold, its glow reflecting on her face now calmer than it had been a year ago. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and a freedom she hadn't felt in the 3 years spent inside Lucian's cold mansion. A year had passed since she left New York, leaving behind Lucian's portrait and a note that read, I don't need the shares. I only ever wanted to be loved sincerely. She had thought she'd fall apart, but here, between the waves and the sky, she was learning how to stand again. Elena now taught painting to children at a small art center where the innocent brushstrokes of her students brought a smile to her face. She rented a tiny apartment and hung her sister Sophia's sunflower painting on the wall, a reminder of her mother, Clara Hart, and what she had left behind. She still remembered that the letter from her mother found in Lucian's locked room was real, but the truth buried in the documents revealed everything had been a lie. She no longer wanted to dig deeper, didn't want more pain. She just wanted to really live for herself. One afternoon, as Elena was about to leave the art center, a delivery man showed up with a package that had no sender's name. She opened it, her heart racing when she saw an old leather-bound notebook with Lucian's handwriting inside. A single note was attached. "If you want to know how I loved you, this is the proof." She hesitated, her fingers brushing the cover, like she was afraid opening it would drag her back to those lonely days in the mansion. That evening in her small apartment under the dim light, Elena opened the notebook, its yellowed pages marking the passage of time. Lucian's handwriting unfolded like a doorway into his soul. The day Clara Hart requested a private meeting. Today Clara Hart came to my office. She walked in slim, composed, but her eyes were steady, as if she carried the weight of the world. She sat down, got straight to the point, and told me she wanted me to marry her daughter, Elena Hart, to protect her and her inheritance. I was stunned, couldn't believe my ears. A stranger, even if a major shareholder of Thorne Enterprises, was asking me to marry her daughter. Clara said she held 30% of the company's shares, and when she passed, they would go to Elena. But she feared her cousin, whom she called Elena's aunt, would manipulate the girl's innocence to steal it all. "Elena doesn't scheme," Clara said, voice trembling. "She's like her sister Sophia, always believing in good. But I lost Sophia. I can't lose Elena too. Please keep this between us." I saw the pain in her eyes when she mentioned Sophia. She told me Sophia had taken her own life, and Clara blamed herself for not protecting her. Her voice cracked. "I know my cousin. She's greedy, cruel. If Elena inherits those shares, she'll destroy her. I need you, Lucian. Marry Elena, hold the shares for 3 years, then give them back when she's strong enough. You're the only one I trust to do this." I refused immediately, not because I didn't want to help, but because I was afraid. I was afraid of marriage, afraid of hurting Elena the way my father hurt my mother. I'd spent years watching my mother suffer, her spirit shattering before she took her life. That memory still haunts me. I couldn't promise Clara anything. I couldn't bring an innocent girl into a life I couldn't guarantee wouldn't destroy her. Clara left, disappointment heavy in her eyes, but I couldn't say yes. The first dinner with Elena. Clara arranged a dinner so I could meet Elena. I came to the restaurant prepared to tell her I wouldn't go along with the plan, but then Elena walked in wearing a sky blue dress, brown hair loose, and that smile, like sunlight after a storm. She sat across from me, shy but genuine, talking about her paintings, her mother, her dream of becoming an artist. I barely spoke, just listened, but my heart beat harder than I wanted it to. She asked about my company, my life, and I gave vague answers, afraid to meet her eyes. I feared that if I looked too long, I wouldn't be able to say no to Clara. When dinner ended, Elena smiled and said she hoped we could be friends. I nodded, but inside I was torn. I wanted to protect her, as Clara had begged, but I also feared marrying her would pull her into my darkness. My father destroyed my mother. I couldn't become that man for Elena. Clara returns. Clara came back a few weeks later. She looked weaker, gaunt, but her eyes were still firm. She told me her time was running out. "I know I'm dying, Lucian," she said calmly, though her voice held pain. "I'm not afraid to die. I'm afraid of leaving Elena alone. My cousin has started moving. She's contacting people who want to take you down, steal the company. If Elena inherits the shares now, she won't survive the attack." I was silent, fists clenched. Then Clara strong. Proud Clara got on her knees. "Please," she wept, "save Elena, not for me, but because she deserves to live, to be loved. I believe in you, Lucian. I saw the way you looked at her during dinner. You have a heart, even if you try to hide it." I helped her up, but I still couldn't make the promise. I said I needed time, but deep down I knew I was running, afraid afraid that if I married Elena, I'd not only hurt her, I'd destroy myself. I was too scared to love, too scared to drag her into my haunted life. Clara's death. Today I got the news Clara Hart passed away. I sat in my office, holding her letter and shaking hands. The handwriting trembled. Lucian, I trust you'll do what's right. Protect my daughter. Don't let her lose everything like Sophia. My chest tightened. Clara had trusted me, yet I had said no. Twice. Then my lawyer James emailed me. He reported that Elena's Aunt Clara's cousin was planning to manipulate Elena to seize control. She's contacting your enemies, James wrote. If Elena inherits the shares now, she'll be used to destroy you. The company will fall, and Elena will be left with nothing. Marriage is the only way to transfer control to you for 3 years, as Clara intended. I read the email, each word a knife. If I didn't marry Elena, she'd inherit the shares, and her aunt would tear her apart. I thought about Elena's smile at dinner, the light in her eyes when she spoke about art. I thought about Clara kneeling before me, and I thought about my mother who died because no one protected her. I couldn't look away. I couldn't let Elena suffer the same fate. The final decision. I agreed to marry Elena, partly for the company, but more than that because I couldn't bear the thought of her being torn apart by her aunt and my enemies. James drafted the contract. I would control the 30% shares, and after 3 years they would return to Elena just as Clara wished. But as I signed the papers, my hands shook. I was terrified I couldn't love her without hurting her. Terrified I'd become my father. I made Clara a promise to protect Elena, but I didn't know how to keep it without destroying her in the process. All I knew was that from the moment I saw her smile, she'd taken a part of my heart, and I would do anything to keep her safe, even if that meant staying distant, staying silent, hiding the truth. I would be her husband in name, but I didn't dare be a husband in truth. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't dare. Part continues in next message. Wedding day. Today, Elena became my wife. She walked down the aisle in a white dress, her face radiant, but her eyes holding a hint of sorrow. I stood there in a black suit, heart pounding, not from joy, but from fear. I had promised Clara I'd protect her daughter, but when Elena took my hand, all I wanted to do was run. I was afraid I'd hurt her like my father hurt my mother. When the pastor pronounced us husband and wife, I didn't dare kiss her. I only bowed my head. She smiled, but I saw disappointment in her eyes. I had already started failing on day 1. The night she cooked, I came home late, as usual, avoiding facing Elena. But the smell of beef stew filled the kitchen, drawing me in. She stood there in a white apron, hair tied back, humming a song. The table was set for 2, but I knew I wouldn't sit. She looked at me with hopeful eyes and asked, "Will you have dinner with me?" I shook my head and said I had urgent work, then left. But I stood outside the door, listening to her quietly clean up, the clinking of dishes echoing in the silence. My heart ached. She was trying, and I was giving her nothing but silence. I was a coward, too afraid to step into her world. The night she invited me to a concert. Elena left a concert ticket on the table with a note. "Carnegie Hall tonight. I thought you'd enjoy it." She'd chosen a classical concert, something I'd once mentioned at our first dinner. I held the ticket tightly, wanting to say yes, but then I thought of my mother, her shattered gaze when my father turned away. I was afraid that if I got closer to Elena, I'd ruin her too. I didn't go. Later I found out she went alone, wearing a blue dress, sitting in the crowd yet utterly alone. I hated myself, but still I chose to run. Watching her paint. Today I saw Elena in the living room, standing at her easel. She was painting a field of flowers, her brushstrokes full of emotion, like she was pouring her heart into it. Sunlight poured through the window, lighting up her hair like gold. I stood at the doorway, too afraid to enter, just watching. She smiled at the canvas, a smile I had never seen when she was with me. I wanted to tell her she was talented, that she was the light in this house, but I said nothing. I was a coward, too scared my words would hurt her more. Hearing her cry. Late at night, I heard soft sobs from Elena's bedroom. I stood outside her door, hand clenched on the knob, but I couldn't open it. She cried quietly like she was afraid I'd hear. I knew she was crying because of me, because of my silence, my distance, the hopes I had crushed. I wanted to go in, hold her, tell her I never meant to hurt her. But memories of my mother crying alone stopped me. I feared that touching her would only bring her more pain. So I walked away, leaving her in the dark, watching her wither away. Every day I saw Elena fade. Her smiles grew fewer. The spark in her eyes dimmed. She still cooked, still painted, still tried to be a wife, but I knew she was wilting. She sat at the dining table across from an empty chair, her dresses seemingly chosen to hide the loneliness. I watched from a distance, heartbreaking. I wanted to rush to her, tell her I saw her, that I loved her. But I was too much of a coward. I was afraid my love would be a burden. So I stayed silent and let her wither inside the home that was ours. The day she filed for divorce, Elena placed a piece of paper on the dining table, her eyes steady but full of pain. "Divorce papers," she said, voice trembling. "I can't live like this anymore, Lucian." I picked up the paper, my hands shaking, unable to say a word. She asked, "Why have you never touched me? Why did you marry me?" I wanted to scream that I loved her, that I married her to protect her, because Clara had begged me to, but I stayed silent, afraid that the truth would only hurt her more. She turned away and I saw her eyes shatter, just like my mother's did. I had failed, just as I always feared I would. The day she was with Julian, I saw Elena in the park, sitting with a man. Julian, she called him. She smiled a smile I had never seen in 3 years. He touched her hand and she didn't pull away. I sat in my car not far off, feeling my heart rip apart. She was happy but not with me. I wanted to run to her, pull her back, but I had no right. I had pushed her away, left her to be alone. I could only watch like a coward and blame myself for not being brave enough to love her. The day she discovered the contract. Today, Elena entered my office. I walked in and saw her holding the Operation HART file, her face pale, tears falling. "You married me to take my mother's shares," she screamed, her voice breaking. I wanted to explain that I married her to honor Clara's wish, to protect her from her aunt, that I was only holding the shares for 3 years, just like Clara planned. But I said nothing because I knew she wouldn't believe me. She dropped the folder on the floor and left a note. "I don't need the shares. I only ever wanted to be loved sincerely." Her words cut through me like a blade. I had lost her because of my own cowardice. The day she left. Elena left the mansion without looking back. She left behind a portrait of me, my painted eyes filled with pain, as if she had seen the truth I tried so hard to hide. I picked up the portrait, hands trembling, feeling like the world had collapsed. She was gone, taking with her every bit of light in this house. I sat in my office, rereading the emails about her aunt, the threats against me. But none of it mattered anymore. I only wanted Elena to come back. I wanted to tell her I loved her. But I was a coward. I let her walk away without stopping her. Searching for her. I searched for Elena everywhere. New York, Chicago, Boston, every place she had ever mentioned. I asked her friend Mia, but she only shook her head and said Elena needed time. I went to galleries, art centers, hoping to see her standing at an easel, smiling like she once did. But she wasn't there. Today I found her, but I couldn't approach. I knew anything I said would be meaningless. So I wrote this notebook recording every moment I loved her, from the meals she made, the nights she cried, to the day she left. I sent it, not knowing if she would ever read it. I only know that I will never stop hoping, never stop begging for her forgiveness, even if I don't deserve her. Elena. Elena hugged the notebook to her chest, her heart in turmoil. She had believed Lucian only used her, but these pages showed he carried a heavier burden than she imagined. A promise to her mother, a fear of repeating his father's mistakes, and a love he was too afraid to show. It made him a man both heartbreaking and heartbreaking to love. She thought of the portrait she had left behind, his eyes in the painting full of anguish, and wondered, did I misunderstand him? The next morning, Elena stood before her easel and began a new painting. She painted the sea, deep blue waves crashing under a bright star in the sky. It wasn't just the sea, it was her, free, strong, learning to forgive not Lucian, but herself. She remembered what Mia once told her. You carry Clara Hart's strength in you. And she knew that to truly be free, she had to face the past and the secrets her mother and Lucian had left behind. She placed Lucian's notebook on the table beside Sophia's sunflower painting. She wasn't ready to return to New York, but she was done running. She picked up her phone and texted Mia, I'm okay. I'm finding myself again. Thank you. Then she looked out the window where sunlight danced on the ocean and smiled. She would keep painting, keep living, and someday she would find her answer. Not for Lucian, but for herself. Elena stood in front of the headquarters of Thorne Enterprises in New York, the lights from the upper floor windows casting a glow on her face, now more resolute than it had been a year ago. A year in California, surrounded by ocean waves and brushstrokes, had helped her find herself again. The painting she had created of the sea with a bright star in the sky had become a symbol of freedom and forgiveness, not just for Lucian, but for herself. But Lucian's journal with its entries of suppressed love, the meals she had cooked, the outings she had hoped for, and the promise he made to her mother, Clara Hart had pulled her back. She hadn't come to rekindle anything. She came to confront him to ask one final question. She took a deep breath and stepped into the lobby. The receptionist recognized her surprise, but quick to lead her to the top floor where Lucian's office was. The door opened, and Lucian stood there more hollow-cheeked than she remembered, but his eyes still as deep as the ocean she'd seen during their first dinner. Elena, he whispered, his voice hoarse, as if he couldn't believe she was truly there. Before she could speak, he stepped forward, and in an unexpected moment, pulled her into his arms. It was a tight embrace, restrained, desperate, as if he was afraid she'd vanish if he let go. Elena froze, feeling his warmth, his breath against her hair. 3 years of loneliness, cold dinners, and abandoned plans melted for a moment. She let him hold her, then gently pushed him back, her gaze steady. Lucian, she said, her voice trembling but clear, I didn't come back to stay. I came to ask you one thing. If you had nothing left, no company, no shares, no promise to my mother, would you still love me? Lucian froze, his hands still half raised, aching to touch her again. The silence that followed wasn't the cold one she had known for the past 3 years. His eyes burned, as if every wall had finally crumbled. From the moment you smiled at our first dinner, he said, voice shaking, you've owned every part of me. I was a coward for not coming closer. But I love you not because of the shares, not because of the company, but because you are Elena Hart, the woman who made me want to be a better man. Elena looked at him, her heart torn, tears slipping down her cheeks. She wanted to believe him, but 3 years of pain, of cooking for someone who never ate, of painting for someone who never looked, had left deep scars. She pulled a yellowed piece of paper from her pocket. I read my mother's final letter, she said, her tone softening. She said she believed you would protect me, but that she also wanted me to be strong like her. I'm going to study business, Lucian. I'll reclaim my mother's shares not for power, but to preserve her legacy. I don't want to be the pretend wife anymore, but I'm also done running from the truth. Lucian stepped closer, placing a hand over his heart. I don't expect forgiveness, he said, voice raw. But if you give me the chance, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I love you, not because of a promise or a legacy, but because of who you are. Elena looked at him, hesitation flickering in her eyes. She thought of her mother, of Sophia's sunflower painting, of the years she spent alone in that mansion. She thought of her painting of the sea, the bright star in the sky. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's having the courage to begin again. She reached out her hand. Lucian took it, his warmth like a new vow, reminding her of the embrace they had just shared, their first in 3 years. 2 years later, they entered the shareholder meeting room not as husband and wife, but as partners. 2 people rebuilding not just a company, but trust. Elena stood beside Lucian, her gaze steady like her mother's once had been. Before them lay a future not perfect, but full of hope. As they left the boardroom, Elena looked up at the New York sky, where stars twinkled above the city lights. She smiled, knowing she had finally found her answer, not from Lucian, but from within her own heart.